You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 591.
Hi folks, and welcome back to The Outdoors Station, the place where we share stories, adventures and conversations that celebrate everything we love about the great outdoors. Now, I've just come back from 13 wonderful days walking the Wainwright Coast to coast through the Lake District with my wife, Rose. And yes, there will be an audio diary series of podcasts coming from that very soon. We were lucky enough to experience the landscape at its absolute best in glorious sunny weather. Those sweeping views, the ever-changing skies, and that unbeatable sense of peace you only get when you're out in the hills. And standing there, surrounded by all that natural beauty, it really reminded me why places like this hold such a special place in so many people's hearts. Which brings me perfectly to today's episode, because we're talking about one of the most iconic spots in the lakes, Scafell Pike. It's England's highest mountain and a magnet for walkers and climbers from all over, but there's so much more to it than just the summit. Joining me to dig into that is author, mountain leader and outdoor enthusiast Graham Uney. His latest book, just released and published by Vertebrate Publishing, explores 15 different and exciting routes up Scafell Pike. And trust me, it's not just a guidebook. It's a celebration of the mountain and its many moods. We'll be chatting about Graham's writing process, some of his favourite routes, his past life as a Helvellyn hilltop assessor, and of course, what it is like to finally hold the finished copy in his hands. So, whether you're planning your own trip to the lakes or just love hearing tales from the fells, stick around for my conversation with Graham Uney.
Yeah, it's nice to see. I mean, it's obviously been in the making for a little while now. So I'd seen PDFs and similar, as I think you have as well. So yeah, it's nice to actually get the finished product and have a proper look through it. That's great.
And this isn't your first book, I noticed, looking on your website. You've done several books. So has your style changed, do you think, over the years that you've been doing these sort of guides?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my first book was way back in the 1990s. That was a guidebook to the 2,000 foot peaks of Wales. And it sold okay, and it was an okay book. But I think if I could go back and rewrite it today, I would.
So yeah, out of curiosity, then, from an author's point of view, what's changed? What would you do differently?
I think that the whole writing process has changed. I mean, the Welsh book was written on a typewriter, for one thing. These days it's obviously all done on laptop, which is nice. The photography's changed over the years. I mean, the photographs in my Welsh book were all scanned from prints, whereas obviously everything's digital these days, which just makes it a much nicer end product and just easier to work with as well. Yeah.
So the days of printing film and scanning pictures, it was a big leap, wasn't it, when it all of a sudden came straight out of the camera, straight onto the computer. It was very
felt weird at the time, didn't it? But it's great now.
Yeah. Yes. Now you've got used to it. That's true. Yeah. So obviously the book's all about various routes up Scafell from different approaches. We'll talk a bit about that, and we'll also then perhaps talk a bit about some of your other experience and obviously a mountain leadership experience as well to give people an idea of what they should consider before tackling something like Scafell, especially if they haven't done it before. So what's your relationship with the area? What's your history with that particular area and that particular mountain?
Yeah, I mean, the Lake District as a whole, I live in the Lake District now, so I've lived here for a number of years. I think the mountains of the Lake District were probably, looking back, pretty much the earliest I discovered as a kid, as a sort of 13, 14-year-old child. Used to come up to the Lake District with the scout group that I was in, that back then in the mists of time. and discovered the love of the Lake District then. But as you say, since then I've gone on to become a professional mountaineering instructor, and chose to base myself here in the lakes because I love it. The sort of Scafell Pike region, that's over on the west side of the Lake District. I live over on the east side, so it's not exactly in my back garden, but it's an area, it's a region I know really well. A lot of my work takes me into that mountain range on a daily or certainly weekly basis at least. And I've been exploring there since childhood. So.
It's a vast landscape, really, isn't it? And so there's a lot to explore. So when you talk to your guests that come and you're leading them and guiding them, what's their first impressions of the area and of obviously the challenge ahead of them?
Yeah, I think that has probably changed actually over the years. But back in the old days, I think people didn't know that much about the area. They might have picked up a guidebook or maybe seen something in a magazine about the area. The information about what to expect wasn't as freely available back then. Today, obviously, social media is very much the driving force to getting people into the hills. So I think people kind of know what to expect when they get there. I think for beginner hill walkers, they maybe just don't know how that's going to feel to them if they've never actually done it before. And that's the challenge. I think they see so many people going up into the mountains via social media and just think it's going to be easy, and of course it's not. It's actually quite challenging for anybody really. So that's one thing to overcome, is sort of managing expectations of new hill walkers, so they know what to expect and know that it is actually going to be quite hard work to get to the top of the mountain and back down again. Yeah.
Is there sort of a common feedback that your guests give you then when they approach something like this? Do they say, well, that's much tougher than I thought it was going to be? Or do people look at themselves and think, I can or I can't do that, in the sense that it was much easier than I thought it was going to be?
Yeah, a bit of both, to be honest, Bob. I think, some people, it is achievable by any hill walker or any walker, any reasonably fit person. It's achievable by them, And I think for the bulk of people that attempt something like Scafell Pike or any of the big mountains in the UK, initially, quite often when you speak to them or take a booking from them in advance, they quite often think it's going to be really easy. And then strangely, when you meet them on the morning, they're often quite nervous and they've almost sort of backed down from that, just assuming it's going to be a walk in the park. And then you get moving with them on the hill and it's just a fun day, really. The intention is that, we want people to enjoy their time in the mountains and in the Lake District. So it's making it fun regardless of what the weather's doing or how tough they're finding it, and focusing on the fact that, yes, it's going to be a challenge, but it is achievable. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I presume that obviously in weather like we're having at the moment, which is this glorious burst of sunshine, and even when it's raining, it isn't as tough as it might be when it's deepest winter. That must be a completely different experience.
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, at the moment, the big challenge is dehydration for most people. They haven't really factored in that they're probably going to be on the mountain for 5, 6, 7 hours. And a lot of people just don't realise how much liquid they actually need to take in on days like we're having at the moment. Even things like, filling up water bottles at mountain streams and maybe filtering it, before you can drink it. Most of the streams are dry at the moment, so there isn't water available on the mountain. And I think, that in itself is a particular challenge to hot days as we're having at the moment. We don't get that many hot days like this in the Lake District, but it's a peculiar challenge at the moment. In winter, it is obviously very different. I think going out into the winter mountains, for all of us, really, we need to see that as more of a mountaineering challenge rather than just going for a walk, And in the winter months, there can be days with no snow. We often get days in the winter months when there's no snow on the hills at all. But if there is snow on the hills, then, they demand respect, and the proper equipment, Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just coming back to the book, actually, you've got a lovely introduction that really covers all sorts of aspects that people need to consider about personal safety and responsibility, and also taking pets, and the various things about, you're walking through somebody else's environment, so please, keep it and leave it better than you found it, almost, which is a good introduction. But the main thrust of the book obviously is 15 different routes to the peak, without going through all of them, because they're all got a story, I'm sure. Is there any one particularly that you would suggest to somebody that was perhaps a beginner, that wanted to perhaps have a go at it and enjoy the views and pleasures of the walking, and another route that's more challenging for somebody that really wants to push themselves?
Yeah, I mean, the book itself covers walks within the Scafell Pike region. So not all 15 walks will take you to the summit of Scafell Pike. So some of them are low-level walks. The first two walks in the book are very much kind of low-level valley walks that will give you nice views of Scafell Pike. The first walk is a walk up Eskdale, which is lovely. It's a really lovely place to go up the Esk Gorge. So it starts with that, and I suppose by the time you get on to exploring the mountains and actually walking on the mountains, using the book, you're looking at things like the lower fells first, the lower hills first. So I guess in some ways, if readers of the book went through it and did each walk, it's kind of a progression, I guess, from starting out in the valleys, exploring, learning what you can do as an individual, learning a little bit more about the environment that you're walking through, and then building upon that experience to actually then start thinking about the mountain route on Scafell Pike itself. In terms of the sort of the easiest route up Scafell Pike, it's kind of the classic route from Wasdale Head. It unfortunately gets called the tourist route, purely because it's the shortest, and it tends to be the route that most first time ascensionists, shall we call them, would go. Longer routes include things like going in from Langdale, which it's quite a long there and back route. Takes you through very different scenery in a different part of the Lake District to start with. Going in from Borrowdale from the north up through what we call the corridor route, it's an old, very well established walk up to the summit, but that's very different and definitely more challenging than going up from Wasdale Head. So there's a variety of walks there, really, for everyone, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also noticed you finish each walk with a sort of a good to know page as well about the areas, the refreshments you might find in the area, the points of interest and things for people to look out. So it isn't just purely a from A to B type of guide, which is reassuring, really, and gives people something else to read and think about before they tackle it, particularly things like public transport and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, a few years back, you were obviously a hilltop assessor in Helvellyn, I understand, for 5 years, which must have been a fascinating period of time in your life.
It was, yeah. I think the felltop assessor job is kind of much sought after. Lots of people in my industry would dream of doing a job like that. It's a role that's put in place by the Lake District National Park Authority, and the role of the job is to climb Helvellyn every day throughout the winter months, so usually from the 1st of December through to round about Easter, and you go up Helvellyn every single day, take weather readings on the summit, which get fed through to the Met Office, so they've got weather data from the summit of Helvellyn, but also have a bit of a think about the snow conditions underfoot, and write a daily report that goes on to the Lake District Weatherline website that explains what the winter conditions are like on each of the walking routes to the summit. So that's very much the main role of the job. Other things are chatting to people on the hill. Felltop assessors aren't there to police the mountain, definitely not. We want people to have fun, but we want them to do it safely in the winter. So, the role is very much having a bit of a chat with people, and giving advice if it's wanted, but it's not always wanted, so that's fine as well.
And you say it's in competition with your fellow mountaineers, is it, to get that job? Is it a bit of a peach job? Is that how it's classed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many applied when I got the job back in 2014, but I think it was quite a few. I was told there were lots of applicants. Um, and more recently, I finished with the role in 2019 because I felt like I'd climbed Helvellyn enough. I didn't need to do it anymore, although I still do occasionally. So I sort of handed in my notice back in 2019, and the team has grown a little bit since then as well. So I'm pretty sure that when the Felltop Assessor Service takes on new assessors, even today, I'm sure there will be lots of people going for that role. It's very coveted. Yeah.
Right. Well, just talking about that a bit, because I've heard it mentioned many a time on different magazines and so on, but I've never really sort of thought about it, and I've got a great opportunity to ask you a few questions if you don't mind. I presume it's a team of two that go up there from a safety point of view. It's not just one person on their own.
Yeah, it is one person on their own. When I started in the role, there were two of us, but we took it in turns. So it was a 7-day shift. So you'd climb the mountain every day for 7 days, and then the other Felltop assessor would do 7 days, and that was the way it worked. But when you're actually on the mountain, you are alone. There aren't two of you going up together. And then the shift pattern sort of changed when I went into the second winter of my role as Felltop assessor. So I was asked by the other assessor at the time if I'd take on a couple of his days because he was finding it a bit challenging. So I did 9 days working on and 5 days off. The employers, the National Park Authority, took on a third assessor, and it's remained like that since then. So there are now 3 assessors that do a sort of a shift pattern, but it's still just one person at a time on the mountain.
So presumably over a period of time then, you must notice that even though you're relatively fit, or obviously mountain fit anyway before you apply for the job, did you notice that your body changed very much, your fitness levels, your stamina, whatever it may have been, from doing that on a continual basis?
To a certain extent, certainly. I mean, I work in the mountains anyway. I am a mountaineering instructor. So most days I'm on a mountain somewhere. But a lot of my work isn't climbing the same mountain every single day purely for the purposes of taking weather readings. A lot of my work is actually offering instructional courses, which by their very nature tend to be gentler days in the hills. You'll walk up to a location and then stop with your group to teach them something or assess something that they're doing. And that's very much my role, which is still challenging. It's still hard work. But that's very different to going up a mountain just to get to the top, just to take weather readings, to then get down as quickly as you can to then write a report at the end of each day. So I think when I started as the Felltop assessor, I was already pretty hill fit. But yeah, it did. My fitness definitely changed, and working every single day throughout the winter period, where some days you are wading through deep snow, for instance, that's very hard work. So yeah, there's no doubt that my fitness improved over those 5 years. It's probably waned a little bit since.
And during that period then, did you ever come across anything that was completely bizarre from either other people that were up there or just other circumstances?
Yeah, quite often. I mean, because part of the role is to advise people, and often that's people that are out of the depth in winter conditions. So quite a lot of people. Most days there'd be somebody on the mountain that I'd have a bit of a chat with. Usually people that were lost. I remember a couple in very, very poor visibility asking me to show them where they were. So I said, well, get your map out and I'll show you. And they produced a page from a walking magazine, and they were just reading the description. I wanted to know which paragraph they were on, and things like that. And, people a person I remember trying to push a very overweight Labrador dog up the snow slopes at the top of Swirrel Edge. But the guy that was trying to push this dog up the hill didn't have crampons on himself, so he was sliding, So things like that,
I hope you're enjoying these conversations here on the Outdoors Station. Whether you're out on a hike, planning your next adventure, or just dreaming of the hills, please take a moment to leave us a quick review on your podcast app. It might not seem like much, but those reviews really help more people discover the show and keep us visible as the algorithms constantly shift. Plus, it lets me know what you're loving and want more of. And if you've got a friend who loves the outdoors, why not share this episode with them? Word of mouth is still the best way to share almost 600 podcasts covering 20 years in the great outdoors. Don't forget you can also visit our website at theoutdoorsStation.co.uk and join the newsletter. It's the best way to stay in touch, get updates on new episodes, bonus content, and the occasional bit of behind-the-scene news. So thank you for listening and for helping the Outdoor Station continue to grow, evolve, and inspire. You are part of the journey, and we'll see you out there.
Out of curiosity, did you ever time yourself to get up there and down on an average day? Did your speeds increase?
Yeah, you would think so. The only time I really remember kind of timing myself, but the intention isn't to do it quickly. But I remember at the end of the very first winter season, at that time, although I was working on Helvellyn, I actually lived in Snowdonia in North Wales, and I had a job in Wales that afternoon. I was running a rock climbing session in Wales that afternoon. So I got up very early and ran to the top and back down. I think I got down in just over an hour. But that wasn't typical at all. That wasn't the intention, because the National Park Authority actually want you to spend a bit more time on the mountain, because then you're seeing more people, and you are the public face of the National Park Authority on Helvellyn. So it's important that you are up there when most of the walkers are up there, and you're spending time chatting with people rather than just running up and running down as quickly as you can.
I see. So you when you actually head up there, it's during normal hours then. I was visualising that you might set off at 5 o'clock in the morning to get early morning readings.
Yeah, that's what most people assume. They think, that we go up sometime in the middle of the night and sort of get down to write a report that morning. The problem with that is, as I'm sure you probably appreciate, the mountains are going to be much colder at night usually. If we did that when I was felltop assessing, if I'd gone up at night, I would have been reporting that it was really cold and really dark and I couldn't see very much, which isn't typical of what most people are going to expect when they go up Helvellyn. So it was more important to be up there round about midday, really, when the bulk of the other walkers and climbers and skiers were on the mountain, so that you're taking readings that are very representative of when the average normal person will be on the mountain. And the report doesn't go live until late, well, it's sort of early evening, actually, for the next day. So the report is, this is what we found in terms of ground conditions on this day, and marry this up with the weather forecast for tomorrow, and this is what you might expect to happen tomorrow.
Oh, right. Okay. So, well, thanks for that. You sort of clarified a lot of mystique that's sort of associated with those few words, hilltop assessor.
Yeah, there is a lot of mystique.
Well, yeah, let's not spoil it too much. Let's keep it fairly mysterious. A bit like the SAS. You know they're
Indeed.
there, but you're not too sure what they do. That's great. You've touched on a couple of things there. Obviously, during that period of time in the hilltop and assessing and representing the park and talking to people, as much as obviously in the book itself, you give a lot of advice about personal safety, as I said, and also how to get the most out of the day. In your view, especially living in the area as long as you have now, how has things changed? I mean, we've had a really weird, strange section in the previous years, obviously with COVID, and obviously the effect that's had on people's mental health and their attitude to the outdoors. But what's the impression that you've been left with over the last, say, 10 years of how things have changed, whether it's sort of approach to wild camping or approach to the countryside or mental health and the benefits and so on? I'd be interested to see, you've talked to a lot of people, you've educated a lot of people, you've witnessed a lot of things. What's your view of how the changes, as it were, that's taken place?
Yeah, it's a really interesting questions, because we've all seen a change in the mountains, not just in the Lake District, but throughout Britain, and it has definitely got to the point where there are lots more people going into the mountains, and I think we did see that after COVID. Once we were kind of released and told that we could go back out and explore again. In fact, even before we were told that, lots of people were kind of discovering the outdoors for the first time, and I think it's very easy to be a little bit sniffy about that and almost elitist. And I don't think that's right. We want people to explore, and we want people to enjoy the outdoors because it is good for your mental health. We've kind of known that for a long time. It's no surprise, but I think more and more people are becoming aware of just how important outdoor spaces are to them. So we certainly don't want to say to people, don't come to the Lake District, don't go to Scotland, don't go to Snowdonia. We want people to enjoy those places. The difficulty is that a lot of people that are going into the more remote areas, they almost don't know how to behave. And I think it's very difficult to get that message across to people. Particularly a sort of a middle-aged white guy like myself, who 10 years ago, when I was Felltop assessing, I had quite a high profile in terms of what I do, a high profile on social media, and I do to a certain extent now. But younger people coming into the mountains aren't going to listen to me. They need younger role models who can help them understand, how to behave, how to get yourself skilled so you can look after yourself properly in the mountains, understand about not littering and not lighting fires and, all the other stuff that goes on at the moment. And I'm not saying that's never happened. There has always been littering in the hills and people just behaving badly. But I think the sheer weight of numbers today, it's getting to the point where, in terms of, let's say, mountain accidents and rescues, some of the mountain rescue teams are really struggling. They're at breaking point, really, just because of the sheer numbers of call-outs that they're getting. And I wonder if some of the mountain rescue teams, probably need to almost double their numbers of volunteers, I think, really, to handle that sheer weight of call-outs that they're getting. And that raises issues in itself. Trying to double a mountain rescue team's volunteer base means more bigger premises, more equipment, more training, and a lot more money's needed. So it's easy to sort of see that and think that's what needs to happen. It's probably not going to happen because it's too challenging.
It's a very difficult one. You've hit the nail on the head there, I think, in the sense that type of people that are heading into the hills these days, the sort of the Gen Zs or whatever it is, that have grown up with social media, have grown up really in the last sort of 5 years, really, through COVID and through other young people doing activities like this. But as you say, they don't really have heroes or role models. The ones that I feel that they are aware of are the extreme ends of things. Yeah. It's always an extreme adventure, an extreme challenge, or whatever else. And sometimes it's the real simple things that can actually give you a bit of a headache. The mountain rescues, have the type of calls that they've been attending, have they been relatively simple call-outs, but ultimately somebody's got themselves lost, or are people getting themselves into, more dangerous situations?
Yeah, I think certainly the teams that I'm aware of here in the Lake District, I think most of them are finding that there are fewer people getting lost than there used to be, because by and large, most people these days navigate using their phones, so by and large, they can manage to extricate themselves from somewhere on a mountain. Quite often, I think it's because there are more people going into the hills. I think it's simple, just accidents, twisted ankles, that kind of thing. But there are just more of them. Occasionally, there's definitely people getting themselves into really tricky situations. And I think that's partly to do with the use of technology to navigate. Because when you're looking at, say, a mobile phone screen, your view of what's around you is very limited because the screen itself is tiny. So you're not actually looking at the bigger picture, And I think it's very easy for people to, follow a heat trail on a phone or on a device that might not actually be a path, because a heat trail could be a heat trail because people have gone that way, turn around and come back again. It's going to be a stronger heat trail, So places like Piers Gill on Scafell Pike, which is a really big accident black spot, and it has been for a number of years. A lot of that is due to people not being able to actually navigate themselves and following a device rather than a map, and not realizing that actually it's a dangerous place to be,
And what about the explosion in sort of wild camping? Has that been a noticeable difference in the last 5-10 years?
Yeah, similar sort of thing, really. I mean, I like to encourage responsible wild camping. I think that is something that is sustainable. The numbers of people going wild camping have definitely increased, and to the extent that there are certain locations within the Lake District that 10, 15, 20 years ago, you may have had, I don't know, one tent there every other week, and you could go to them on any sunny evening and there could easily be 10 or 20 tents there now. Tonight, some of those locations tonight will have 20 tents there, without a doubt. That's changed, definitely. Some things in terms of wild camping, I think, have changed for the better. So when I started wild camping in the Lake District, again, back in the mists of time, it was back then perfectly reasonable to go to a wild location, pitch your tent, and kind of leave it there for a few days and go out and climb or go out and walk and return to it. And, we just don't do that now, or we shouldn't be doing that now, because it's a visual scar on the landscape. And camping in the same location for 2 or 3 nights isn't on, it actually does have an effect on the landscape. So in terms of that sort of thing, that's a massive improvement. I think most people going wild camping tend to understand that, So yeah, it's the same as everybody going into the hills. There are more of us, and I think it's about trying to understand how to educate people just as to what is acceptable and actually what really isn't good behaviour in the mountains.
Instantly, the next question is, when you obviously were doing the hilltop assessing, and or whatever you're doing now, obviously, how do you have a conversation with somebody that's obviously doing something that's not appropriate, and do it in a positive way that they'll listen to you, as opposed to it turning into a confrontation?
Yeah, it is really tricky. I mean, when I worked as the Felltop assessor, all of my uniform was branded, so I had a massive Lake District National Park Authority logo on my chest, and on down both arms it said Felltop assessor, so it was fairly obvious that you were somebody from the authority. And I think for most people, that made them believe at least that you had some sort of right to go over to them and challenge them if they were doing something wrong. I don't think I did particularly have that right. It was just something that, because you're wearing branded clothing, you could do. And it was written into my job description that I was supposed to do that. But quite often people even then would be confrontational. They would tell you in no uncertain terms what they thought of you trying to spoil their day in the hills. And, the answer to that is just, walk away, really, isn't it? Don't try to be confrontational with people like that. Now I'm no longer the Felltop assessor. I'm running my mountaineering business. I tend to advise people if it's obvious that they need some help. So someone who's clearly standing at a path junction, not sure which way to go, I'll have a chat and see if they need help. I tend to not be very confrontational myself anyway. If someone's in danger, yes, I'm definitely going to say something. Whether they choose to accept that advice is up to them, But if someone's actually in danger, I think it's just a moral responsibility of any human being to try to intervene, isn't it? But not everybody will, as you say, will welcome that advice or that sort of challenge to what they're doing.
Yeah, it's a very fine line, isn't it? Very fine line to keep the enthusiasm and the conversation positive, but at the same time, direct people. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you, and congratulations on the book. And we'll give everybody the details of where they can get the book from. Certainly, if you're going to the Lake Districts area, it's definitely a book recommended. As Graham was saying there, there's some gentler walks and more challenging walks. But as always, Graham, I always like to finish with a question, which is, of all the things I could have asked you about this particular book and Scafell Pike, and obviously some of your history as well, what should I have asked you?
That is a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I think the question that most people who know me have asked, and I'm not sure the publishers will really welcome me saying this, is the previous guidebook in this series from Vertebrate, the publishers, covers 15 walks on Helvellyn. And lots of people have said to me, why didn't you write the one on Helvellyn? So I guess that's the question you maybe should have asked, but I don't know.
And would you have an answer to it? Is there an answer to that one?
I guess because I'm a freelance author and I write for a number of different publishers, I think that Vertebrate just didn't think that I'd be interested because I write for competing publishers as well. I think that might be it, really. They also had someone in mind has done a really good job on that book, on the Helvellyn book, and I think it was a good choice for them to choose. Tina Codlin has written the book on Helvellyn, so I think that's natural. It's just a question that I've been asked a number of times. Why didn't you write the Helvellyn one?
Well, that brings us to the end of this fantastic conversation with Graham Uney. I hope it's inspired you to take a fresh look at Scafell Pike, not just as a peak to conquer, but as a place rich with history, variety and beauty in every step of the journey. Graham's new book, which is available now on adventurebooks.com at $14.95, is a brilliant resource for anyone looking to explore different ways up the mountain, and it really highlights just how much more there is to discover beyond the well-worn paths. Don't forget, coming in the future, there will be an audio diary series recorded by Rose and I when we did the Wainwright Coast to Coast a couple of weeks ago. But before we go, just a gentle reminder, while Scafell Pike is stunning and rewarding, it's also a serious mountain that demands respect. I can personally vouch that the terrain can be tough, the weather can change quickly, and digital mapping on phones doesn't always hold up in those remote conditions. Mountain rescue teams, especially Wasdale Mountain Rescue, have been called out far too often lately, sometimes for completely avoidable situations. So please, if you're planning a visit, make sure you're properly equipped with the right gear, suitable clothing, and a paper map and compass you know how to use. A little preparation goes a long way in keeping you safe and making the experience all the more enjoyable. You can check out wmrt.org.uk, that's Wasdale Mountain Rescue Team.org.uk, for more advice and guidance from the people who know the area best. And don't forget, it's entirely run by volunteers and funded from donations. Thanks again for listening to this, and as always, we'll see you here next time on The Outdoors Station for something else associated with the great outdoors and our pleasure with it. Until then, stay safe and keep exploring. And, of course, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear or see more from our extensive free library, please visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk.